Hey, welcome back to Human X Intelligent. I am Madalena, and I want to start today with something that I believe you will recognize, at least in some sense of way. So, have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a product decision very quickly, there was a deadline, and you had multiple tools open? Let's say that one was for research, another one was for brainstorming, and another one was for meeting notes. This kind of happened to me, and I was moving between tabs like generating outputs, getting summaries, and I felt quite busy. I had absolutely no idea what I actually thought. And that is the problem I want to talk to you about today. Not which AI is best for product people. I want to talk about the problem underneath all of that, which is that most of us have built a very impressive system for producing outputs and a very, very weak system for actually thinking. And here's the part that stops me, because the research is starting to confirm what many of us are quietly feeling. The tools we are using to think faster may be making our thinking much, much worse. So, today, I want to give you something that doesn't go out of date when the next tool drops, basically. A process or something to think about, a way of structuring your thinking, let's say it like this, that works regardless of what it's in your stack. And that protects the thinking or the thing that no tool can replace, which is your judgment. But let's get into it. So, I think it's very important to start here because it is the base of what we do and how we behave. So, let's do science for a little bit, because this is actually a way of reframing what we will talk about today. In 2025, my MIT Media Lab published a study called Your Brain on ChatGPT. So researchers divided around 54 participants into 3 groups over 4 months. One group wrote essays using AI, one used search engines, and one used tools with no tool at all, actually. They measured brain activity using those EEG during every session, basically. So they could control the brain, how it was working and how it was reacting to these situations. And the results were very striking, I would say, because participants who relied on the LLMs showed what the research called cognitive load or death, the accumulation of long-term cognitive costs from over-reliance on AI. Including dismissed critical thinking, reduced creativity, and actually shallow info processing. The brain cognitivity of AI users was up to 55% weaker compared to the group who wrote without any tools. And 83% of the LLM users were unable to quote from essays they had just written. So they basically lost ownership of their own thinking. Yeah. So now I want this to be careful here, because this study is a preprint and it has real limitations because it is a small sample size. And it has also a specific context in mind. So the researchers themselves ask people to avoid using alarmist language about it. But here's what I think is important. It's not about whether AI makes you dumb, because it's about what happens when you use AI instead of your own reasoning, rather than alongside it, like a co-working, like what we're doing with Human X Intelligence, right? So, in a larger, more rigorous study that I want to share with you, this backs up from a different angle. So in 2023, Harvard Business School and Boston Consulting Group ran the field experiment with around 758 knowledge workers, so real consultants, real tasks. They found that AI assistance improves performance from some tasks, but actually worsens it for others. Even within the same workflow at a similar level of difficulty, they call this the jagged technology frontier. So consultants using AI for tasks outside their frontier were around 90% less likely to produce correct solutions than those without AI access at all. The problem with this is that it was not obvious to highly skilled knowledge workers which of their everyday tasks could be done well by AI and which required a different approach. And that's the core issue here, because most of us are using AI on tasks it's not suited for without realizing. Another study in 2025 basically found that something that connects is directly to how we use these tools day to day. So the higher confidence in AI is associated with less critical thinking, while higher self-confidence is associated with more. So the more you trust the tool, the less you interrogate its output. And the less you interrogate it, the more outsource the thinking that should be staying with you. So before we talk about any specific tool, we need to talk about processing or way of thinking, let's say, structuring of this. Because without this, you can't even see where your thinking stops and a tool's output begins. So let's do this. Here's what I found working with product teams building AI products, which is the overwhelm people feel isn't about too many tools. Although there's study about this, there's a lot of studies coming around about how many tools you use and how dumb or not dumb they make you feel, and how much they help versus how much they don't help. But let's focus today on this because usually it's about missing processes. So when you don't have a clear process, every tool looks like the solution. And when you let the tool define the process, when the prompt becomes the problem statement and the output becomes the goal, you actually already lost the thread of your own thinking. So before you open anything, you need actually three things. So you need the goal, you need the problem, and you need the process. So basically, let's give a little bit about each concept and what they mean. So let's start with the goal, because this is the outcome you're actually trying to reach, not the task. The actually reason the task matters. For example, I need to research competitor is not the goal. What is a goal is I need to decide whether to build this feature in key 3. This is the goal. The distinction matters because it changes how you evaluate everything the tool gives you. So when you know the goal, you can tell whether an output is moving toward it or just generating activity. And that goes round and round into the problem, which is the specific obstacle between you and the goal right now. And this is the part people skip most. Are you missing info, drowning in information you can't make sense of, stuck between two equally valid options, suspicious your own reasoning might be biased? So each of this is a different problem, and each requires a different kind of support. For example, if you name the problem before you open anything, that will work because you know actually what you're doing. So you have the goal, you have the person, and you have the problem that you're trying to solve. And then you have the process, which is a sequence of thinking moves that gets you from the problem to the goal. And here I do have a structure that maps down almost every knowledge work situation. So it has 3 modes, and you almost always need to move through all 3 in order. The first one is capture. So in capture is getting raw material out of your head and into a form you can work with. So the job here isn't fidelity, it's not to interpret yet, it's just to collect. The second one is synthesis, finding the pattern across everything you've captured. And actually this is the hardest mode because it's the one that we mostly skipped. It's where you go from, I have a lot of information to understand what it means. And this is the part where we cannot rush, because this is where the quality of your decision is almost entirely determined by the quality of your synthesis. And the third one, which is the last one, is decide, committing to a direction and stress testing it before you act on it. Because, and this is specifically to this, actively looking for the reasons you might be wrong, right? So you need to do this. This is where most people use artificial intelligence most badly, because to confirm what they already think rather than challenge it, and you need to challenge it. But we'll come back to that. So the 3 are goal, problem, and processing. You capture, you synthesize, and you decide. Now, and only now, do the tools become relevant. Before I name anything specific, I want to say this clearly. The tools I use right now will change. I am 100% sure, because some will get better, some will disappear, some will get absorbed into things you already use because they will be bots. But what won't change is the process, your structured thinking. So what I'm really describing here is the job to be done in each mode and what's currently doing that job well for me. So for capture, the job is to record accurately and fast without pulling you out of the moment, basically. So right now I use Granola for meetings and for recordings. It runs quietly in the background and it gives me a structured summary after, so I can stay present in the conversation instead of transcribing, which is something that I love because I'm very curious and I love to ask questions. But any tool doing this job well should support collection, not interpretation. If it's pushing you to summarize or decide before you've even finished in gathering, it's the wrong tool for this mode. The next one, for synthesis, this job is to find the pattern, right? So across all your material, not across the internet, not across everything AI was trained on, but across specific documents, notes, and data you've actually collected. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll know now what it is, because it's the one for this right now, which is Notebook LM. It actually works only with what you give it. So you upload your research, your interview describes, your brief, and basically you can ask things like, what are the contradictions here? Or what is the user data telling us that the brief doesn't address? And the tool doing this job will change, of course, like we were saying. The job making sense of your own material before you decide anything. So here's why this mode matters so much. That's actually, we can go grab it again, the Microsoft research study that found that AI changes the nature of critical thinking for knowledge workers. Shifting toward information verification and response integration rather than on regional analysis, this is where the original analysis lives. So don't skip it or even outsource it entirely because it is a very important step. The next one is for deciding because the job splits in two things. So first, scanning the landscape. What's actually true out there? What are you missing? And the good one for us is perplexity. He does very well because it cites its sources. You can follow the thread rather than just accepting some. And this matters enormously because this is what the research shows about AI and confirmation bias, right? The second one, and this is the one I want to stay on for a moment. So stress testing your own reasoning. This is the most misused mode of all. Most people use AI in the decision phase to confirm what they've already concluded. And they've made the decision consciously or not, and they use the tool to validate it. The higher confidence in AI is associated with less critical thinking, like I said above. The more you trust the output, the less you push back on it. The fix needs to be very intentional because when you're in deciding mode, your prompt is not, is this a good idea? Your prompt is, what are the three strongest arguments against this? Or what am I assuming that might not be true or still meant the opposition, right? So you are using the tool to find the holes in your thinking before you commit. A great one is Claude. Claude is what I use for this right now. Because the job is stress testing. Any tool that can genuinely challenge your reasoning will serve this mode. And the Harvard BCG research gives you a practical way to think about when to trust AI and when to be more careful. Understanding which of your tools are within AI's capability and which aren't is the key to using it well. And now we know more or less how to structure this. But the MIT Sloan creativity synthesis nuances judgment decision with high stakes and ambiguity. And these are often the frontier because if we use these tools to support our thinking, they are not supposed to replace it, right? Another one is for documenting like the decisions, right? Because we now have all of this and how to structure our thinking, how to structure our work and which tools to use in each part of it. But for when it comes to documenting decisions, most of us skip it, right? And we pay for it because when this decision gets retaliated, what do we do? Right. And our job or the job for that is to turn the messy reasoning into a clear record fast. What we decide, why, and what did we consider and reject, what we will revisit. And a good one for this, and I like to use, is Notion AI because it does this very well right now. And this tool will actually change a lot because the practice of documenting decisions won't. And I want to close with something practical, something that we can actually do. Concrete thing you can to keep your thinking intact while using this tool every day. The first is what I would like to call the thinking first rule. So before you open an AI tool on a problem, spend 5 minutes with your own thoughts first. Write down what you actually think, like I always write on my notebook. From there, you want to know what's your hypothesis, what's your instinct. And this is basically to see what you already know versus what you don't. And this is very important because it's about having something to compare the tool's output against. The MIT research found that people who started from their own reasoning before introducing AI were far more able to use it productively and critically. The Brain to LLM group in that study, the ones who built their own thinking first, demonstrated high memory recall and re-engagement of widespread prefrontal areas when they did use AI. Starting from your own thinking gives you an anchor. Without it, you're just following the tool. The second is the mood check. So before you prompt, ask yourself, am I capturing, synthesizing, or deciding? Because as the Harvard research makes clear, using AI on the wrong type of task doesn't just fail to help, it actively makes your output worse. A decision task done with a synthesis tool or a synthesis task done with a confirmation seeking prompt, these don't just produce bad outputs, they produce confidently wrong outputs. And this is the key, confidently wrong outputs. The third one is what I like to call owning your conclusion. After an AI assisted thinking session, before you act on anything, you ask yourself, can I explain this in my own words without referencing the tools? Not to be anti-AI, which you know I'm not, but because if you can't do this, you haven't actually decided anything. You've deferred. And this happens to the best of us, but we need to take this into consideration to do a better job now and in the future. But the research constantly shows significant negative correlation between frequent AI tool usage and critical thinking, mediated by cognitive offloading, because there's a lot happening and we don't want to feel burned out, right? And the offloading isn't the problem, I would say. I don't think it is, because it helps us do a faster job, a better job. But offloading the wrong thing is because we need to keep the judgment, we need to keep the conclusion, and we need to keep the ownership of our own thinking. So to bring it back to where we started, the problem isn't too many tools, or at least not for right now. There are studies being done with this, so might change our idea, but I don't think that it is, because the problem is using them without a defined process. Because if you have a good process, this will work. And without staying present as a person who is actually thinking. Before you open anything, remember, define your goal, name your problem, identify which mode you are in, capture, synthesis, and decide. Think first. Check which mode you're in and own your conclusion. And also, don't forget to hold the tools lightly. The ones I mentioned today, which were Granola, Notebook LM, Perplexity, Claude, Notion AI, and even Microsoft, are what's working for me right now. In a year or even less, some of them will have changed and some of them will be replaced. The process is what travels with us or with you. That's the shift. And once you make it, the overwhelm starts to lift. And this is not because there are fewer tools, because you know exactly what you're doing with them and you know what you're keeping for yourself. If this landed with you, share it with one person on your team who's drowning in tabs right now. That's the best thing you can do with an episode like this. I am Madalena. This is Human X Intelligent. See you in the next one.